I chatted a few days ago with a friend of mine, Zubi. He is a Nigerian-born hip-hop artist who grew up in Saudi Arabia for about 20 years and has an American accent. It's the funniest thing. Like, he is the epitome of internationalization. And his story is fantastic. But what's even better about him, besides the fact that he has a huge following of like 1 million or 2 million people on X, he is remarkably uplifting and positive. And he gets so trashed for that. And I find it so disappointing, Mike.
I don't know what to say to that. I mean, I think this is. I think what you're expressing is a recognition that the majority of people are deeply pessimistic about life, the universe, and everything at the moment. It's not surprising because people are witnessing an out of control global elite, and they feel like they have no agency. They feel like they have no way of dealing with it. And in fact, I would argue that that's simply wrong.
It's more than pessimistic, though. It's almost nihilistic.
Yeah, but we have been trained. We've been trained through the mass media. It doesn't matter whether it's the news media or Hollywood or whatever. We've been trained to think this way, and it's very hard to break out of that. And that's why a lot of people argue that what we need is a cultural renaissance of some kind, and the problem is that the mass media entertainment is so sewn up that it's very, very hard for people with positivity and people with real cultural capability to break into, to be anything other than just an absolute niche. So, I understand people's pessimism, but, and as you say, possibly it's worse than that. Part of the problem is that we're not thinking about resistance, really. We're constantly looking for a knight in shining armor to come and ride to the rescue and save the day, and don't recognize that actually the way out of this starts with us all individually and how we feel within ourselves and what we're doing to deal with our own thought processes and opinions and ideology and so on. And that's where it has to start. And we have to search for the things that we find uplifting. And sometimes for some people that means actually getting involved in some form of activism, but for most people it has to start with just what we consume, and recognize that what we consume isn't necessarily good for us.
I think there are a number of different things to consider, and one of them, and I think quite an important one, is to what extent the individual wraps themselves up in the so-called problems that they see around them. I think in the United Kingdom, I know in Jerm, in your podcast, quite a lot of your guests are not from South Africa, have not been South Africa, and come from a country that's generally regarded as being in a better state, whatever exactly that may mean. And I think you articulate the differences really well. But I would say it's an objective truth that the way in which the United Kingdom functions is not as good as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I think the decline of services across the board and the standards of behaviour in public have deteriorated, and so that's a negative. But what I mean is when you look at that, when you consider that, if indeed that is your view, that is my view, do you think therefore that has an impact on your life that is so direct that you're taking a negative view of your life because of those changes that have happened around you? And this goes slightly back, because actually I was listening to Zubi on the way back from Plymouth, and a lot of what he said I absolutely agreed with, and I thought his point about having children was a very good one, in that the only reason we're here is because every preceding generation has decided that they will bring children into the world, and to take the view that the world is such a rotten place that you're not going to do that is remarkably pessimistic. And so the point is that, in a sense, regardless, and I know that this is said with an awareness of there being a situation in which, you know, you are, say you're in a sort of conflict zone where there is very little you can do about your circumstances immediately around you, but in the most part, whatever is going on around you doesn't have to affect the way you think about the world and the way you regard your life. You can still be positive and indeed lead a positive life in as much as possible. And I think the reason I set it out like that is I think it slightly depends at what point people have joined the roller coaster, and this is obviously a generalization, but I think the way I regard what's happened in our lifetimes, and I should think the lifetimes of anybody who might be listening to this, is that all these things that we've seen, the various corruptions and so forth that have informed our worldview, and by that I mean a worldview that is outside of the one that the mainstream wants us to have, that's all very well, or at least was all very well up until 2020, because actually the way in which things were wrong by and large didn't have to affect the way that you lived your life until 2020, at which point you were, for the most part, actually prevented from doing stuff. You know, if you had a job that involved going to a workplace, the likelihood is that was shut down. If you usually went to a church, that was shut down. If it, you know, so actually all your agency was taken away, but that left you socially and often professionally outside of the far bigger blob that went along with it. And so what you needed was, in a sense, either ammunition or vindication that you weren't mad. And so when things did apparently get worse and worse and worse, you know, as in the government did this and then did that and then did that, you were sort of proving to yourself that you were right. Of course, I can't speak for everybody, but I think this is where a lot of people got into a sort of pattern of not quite celebrating, but looking for more bad news, because it confirmed that their position was the correct one, that they were right, that all this stuff really was that bad, and the government really were telegraphing that the next thing, you know, even though Jenny Harris and the rest of them had said, absolutely don't wear a mask, it's completely pointless, only for them all to come out, you know, 5 minutes later and say, by the way, the one thing you've really got to do is wear a mask. So I do think that plays a huge part in it. And also, if that's when people did join, then the other part to it, I think, is that a similar part is that it really was a sort of, you know, a whole society thing, and to take the view that, well, you know, I'm just going to be positive about it, and this that, and the other was difficult. It was really, really difficult, because how do you do that? And I think there's a hangover. And so going back to the point about, you know, Zuby getting jumped on for saying this, that, and the other, yeah, okay, I don't understand it, and I think that anybody who had fallen into that trap should really have found a way to get out of it. And so then it does become a question of, right, well, what do you want, actually? Do you want to just criticize and be negative about everything, or do you want to get out of it and improve your life? And I'm afraid to say that I think quite a lot of people have sadly been drawn into a situation where they do not want to improve their circumstances.
Yeah,
I'm laughing because of the rooster.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah. You know, he's having a happy time. He's having a great time. He's paying absolutely no attention to what anyone else is telling him he's supposed to be doing.
Sorry, Mike, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to follow on from that. But I think what Charles said there about people wanting effectively confirmation that they were right. is a valid one. I think the mistake that most people made was that's where they stopped. Once they got that confirmation, that was enough. Then they just wanted more and more confirmation of the same thing, and resisting and opposing bad policy doesn't stop with just consumption of more of the bad information. I mean, what does the UK column do? We in a sense contribute to that because we are telling people what's going on in the world. But our hope has always been that, and a lot of people do this, but our hope has always been that people use that information in a positive way and use it to help them inform other people at the very least, but or otherwise use it in some form of activism and some actually doing something because it's that next step which actually takes you out of the negativity. It's that next step of actually getting involved in fighting back against it. That removes the fear, removes the anxiety, absolutely removes any sense that the world has gone mad. Because you are contributing, hopefully, to making it a better place. And we do what we do because that's been our choice of how we express our disgust and our opposition to what certain elites are doing. But hopefully others take that up and recognize that taking that step and doing something is what is needed to actually change your mind from being one of pure negativity because I don't view the world in a massively negative way at all. I think that everything that is going on is ultimately solvable, and if I didn't feel that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So it's chicken and egg. I'm not sure which comes first.
Rooster. In Charles's case, rooster or egg.
I'm not sure. I think you're getting into other areas of talk.
Yes. I think it's still June, isn't it?
But I think the point that Zuby is making is not just being blasé about being, I'm just a positive, happy-go-lucky person. That's obviously not what he's saying. His positivity is about changing yourself for the better. Yeah.
I think another thing just to introduce is the idea of, the association of isolation with these sorts of tendencies or behaviours. And the problem is that once you see it, a lot of people want to evangelize and say, my goodness, have you any idea what so-and-so is actually up to or what this actually means? And the problem is, I think for a lot of people, it's terribly easy to forget what it's like when you haven't made that mental transition. And so talked about it before, but the well-recognized backfire effect where you bound up to the first person you see and say, God, did you have any idea what this, that, and the other is all about? And of course, unless you're very lucky, the response you will get is probably at best one of sort of polite skepticism, but at worst it could be an absolute repulsion, not just of what you've said, but therefore of you also. And so I think for a lot of people who have tried to, in effect, help others by making them aware of whatever it is that they now know about, the effect has sort of been the opposite. They've been pushed further and further into, as I say, a sense of isolation, which comes with the feelings of negativity. So I think I'm not in any way dismissing what Zuby says, but I do have great sympathy for people who've sort of ended up in that position. And let's not forget that this has happened within families. I mean, it is too desperate for words. The fact that people have actually turned against each other, or more accurately, been turned against each other by presenting conflicting beliefs and narratives. But that, again, speaks to the problem, which, of course, is why is it that we live in a society now where we can't apparently talk to each other about this, that, and the other, or at least you have to be very, very careful of the ground that you prepare in order to lead into a discussion about something, because otherwise it will go wrong. People will make a knee-jerk judgment of you and immediately therefore dismiss the material. So, I mean, I'm right with him. I mean, the core tenet, I would say, is if you start with a feeling of negativity, or rather the other way about, I suppose, if you do not start with a feeling of positivity and an absolute definite belief in the sense that you are going to achieve what you're going to achieve, whether that be just a state of mind or something else, you are extremely unlikely to do it.
I would go further than that. I would say that a lot of people have experienced that situation of attempting to bring up topics with others and getting a massive rebuff in return. But within the so-called truth movement, within that group of people, they're fighting amongst themselves as well. Because people have lost the willingness and the ability to listen. Everybody has decided that they are right, and that everybody else is wrong. Even within the so-called truth movement, this is the case. And people have lost this, if they ever had it in the first place, but they've lost any sort of sense of inquiry. And so we should be, in my opinion, we should be attempting to learn from each other, not attempting to bludgeon each other over the head with what we know. I've told this story before. I don't in certain circumstances, but when I was in school and was having a discussion with somebody, and they turned around and said, "Who the hell do you think you are to be telling me what to think?" And I said, "Well, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you what I think." And this actually is part of the problem. We're determined that we are going to tell everybody what we think and that we're right and so on. And if we can't form a sense of community within the people that are supposedly awake, and we can't relearn how to listen, then of course we're going to feel isolated, as Charles says, and that feeds the negativity. So we've got to. It all starts with ourselves. We've got to recognize that societies and networks and groups are made up of individuals, and so it's not actually about criticizing. It's not even about criticizing the king or the prime minister or whatever. We've got to start with criticizing ourselves and recognizing that this begins with us as individuals. And until we change ourselves and inside, we're not going to change anything in the so-called real world.
What amplifies this whole thing is that Q nonsense, in which the white hats are coming to save us. So we can just sit back and wait. And they're going to do everything because they're playing 5D chess.
Yeah, going back to the truth movement, whatever that's supposed to mean, the people have to be a bit more discerning about choosing those people. Mike talking about forming communities. And I think what's been demonstrated over the last few years, and increasingly so, I would say, is that simply sharing a belief that you are part of the truth movement and that you reject the sort of mainstream narratives and this, that, and the other. I mean, that's not enough, or indeed that is not really a sort of worthy criteria. I mean, people's character and outlook and ability to put things to one side and retain a sense of perspective and actually get on and do things are really what matters. And if you do have different beliefs on certain things, but you are not going to fall out over them, and you do, because I think ultimately when if you step back, you look at what is it that motivates people, and again, this came up with Zuby talking about parts of the world that were considered to be more dangerous. I think it was he made the point, which I thought was a very good one, about the reports you get. If anyone has ever heard anything about I mean, it doesn't really matter, but, pick a place. If you haven't been there, then the likelihood is you will have heard a bad report about it. You may have heard some good stuff because perhaps they hosted an Olympic Games or something, propaganda fest. But mostly you would have heard that something bad has happened because that's how the news cycle works. And yet, when you go to that particular place, you think, oh, right, okay, so the whatever it was, the incident that I saw on the news is not, in fact, happening on repeat the entire time in this place, and there we go. So you've got a situation in which, by and large, people are wanting to do positive things for reasons that they believe are the right ones, and I think it's a massive mistake just to think that because people have different beliefs about the particular topic, that their motivations and their goals are different from yours. They're ultimately not. I mean, if we look at going back to the dreadful COVID years, the motivations by and large were the same either side. People either chose to do something or didn't choose to do something because they wanted a particular outcome, and that was to do with consideration for other people. Masks being such an obvious one. The mask wearer would have had the belief that it was preventing other people from getting ill, whereas the non-wearer of the mask did not want to prevent communication and the feeling of human contact or whatever. I mean, it's that simple. And yet, on the face of it, you've got people who appear to be doing stuff that is completely different. Well, actually, they're not. They've just, I've said this before, they've just been presented with or taken a different view on the information they've been presented with.
The COVID era, paradoxically, has made me so much more positive and solutions orientated about life.
Well, I think there's a reason for that, Jerm. I think it's, there's my observation is that there's two, well, let's just say, looking at things from a particular point of view, there's two main types of people in the world. There's people that produce stuff and there's people that consume stuff. Now, you're a producer because you're producing this podcast and you're taking an active role in your life. For the majority of people, it's a different situation. They sit on the sofa and they consume what the mainstream media puts out. They consume food, they consume drink, they consume YouTube videos and so on, and they're never actually producing anything, and it this is also feeding feelings of negativity and feelings of uselessness and feelings of no agency, and just learn a skill, do something different, go to the gym, as you say, and these things aren't necessarily the easiest steps to take. I'm not in any way criticizing anybody. This is just an observation, and I'm going to say, I put myself at the top of the list for all these comments that I'm making. But just taking that step of doing something active in our lives changes our outlook. Absolutely,
it absolutely does, and I'm sure we can all think of people that have done that, and Jerm, likewise. I think the more one considers it and dwells upon it, and when you do make conscious efforts or you do change those things, the benefits are so easy to see, and they have a sort of upward spiral effect as well. I think that's the other thing. To begin to get out of a situation of negativity has increasingly, I would say for the most part, has increasingly positive consequences. It's not just sort of one step forward, two steps backwards. It certainly shouldn't be. The start, the hardest part, of course, is the start. But I think once that's made, and once there's a recognition that some difference has been made, some ground's been gained, then the rest of it in relative terms is sort of straightforward. You just keep going.
Bob Moran made a great comment. I think I've mentioned this before. He said that you must just treat everything as if it's theatre.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely for those that, well, I mean, let's face it, for those things that don't directly concern you. If you, I don't remember him saying that, but I would imagine he's talking about things that are sort of a bit more remote. Because that again, that's another. We've talked about that before as well. But if you switch all this stuff off, because let's face it, it is a question of switching stuff on and off. I mean, okay, sometimes people will go and sit in the gallery in the House of Commons or the House of Lords or whatever, or they will go to sort of public debate or this, that, and the other. But by and large, we're consuming all this stuff on a screen, and it doesn't exist if you turn the screen off. So that is absolutely another part of it. And considering, separating the parts of your life that are real and that are happening because they are right there around and in front of you, and those bits that aren't. The what other people are up to need not really affect you in any particular way. That's your choice. Yes, a lot of what we talk about are changes to this, that, and the other, and I don't mean to suggest that you can sort of you can put yourself in a position with any great degree of ease, which means that you won't be affected by all of this. And I think that going back to, say, the Zuby point, I think some of the this is not particular to him. I've no idea if he's susceptible to this. I think some people, particularly who are sort of prominent on social media or whatever, can attract, let's say, criticism because they appear to be putting forward a sort of what I've never been on Facebook, but what I would describe as a Facebook lifestyle. I couldn't understand the concept of Facebook because my first sort of engagement with technology was email and the reply all, like group reply all email, which was always a joke, usually at somebody's expense. And then suddenly I was being told about this thing called Facebook, where people just posted photographs and everyone said, "Oh, lovely, how nice." And I really I didn't get it at all. But the point is that these days the sort of the equivalent to that is people who just put a lifestyle onto social media that suggests that they have absolutely no impediment to anything they want to do. They're always surrounded by sort of amazing food and wine and sort of endless beaches and swimming pools. And you just think, right, okay, well, I'm not sure that's really very relatable. And I think that's why there can be some criticism drawn. But I mean, that's, I'm using a sort of an extreme example. Otherwise, if you are just talking about the things that are around you in a more normal sense and suggesting that that you can deal with those things, then why does the rest of it matter? I don't see why it should. I mean, that's sort of our failing if we let it.
How do you feel after you've had a conversation or you've spent time with a certain person? So, for example, I made the very difficult decision during the COVID era to kind of disconnect myself from people who were having a very sort of toxic effect on me.
I think it's essential. And, we have the ability to meet people and make friends and so on. We absolutely have to be discerning about who we're spending time with and decide whether it's healthy for us. It's no different to any other input, in terms of food or drink or the air we breathe or whatever, the lifestyle that we lead. It's absolutely a key part. We are influenced by everything that's around us. And of course, we're influenced particularly by people that we consider to be our peers. And if we have surrounded ourselves with people that are that way, then of course we're going to be that way too. It can be difficult to maybe change that. Again, unfortunately, it all comes back to ourselves first, because we can't expect anybody else to get us out of that mindset. We've got to take the decision that we're not going to think this way anymore, and then try to find other people that are also, not thinking that way. And it, that has to be where it starts. That's always where it starts.
I
And
think,
that's how you win battles, by the way, Mike. It starts with you.
Right.
absolutely.
Sorry, go on, Charles.
No, I was just going to say, in a conversational sense, I mean, a conversation, by and large, we usually mean with one other person, I guess. Not always, obviously, this being an exception. But the point is that I know exactly what you mean. You can be in conversations that appear to be depressing, but you shouldn't forget that you are half of that conversation, and therefore you should have the ability to maneuver that conversation or change the tone or the tenor of it into a positive space. So yes, you might find that there are people presenting with negativity, negative points, negative talking points, whatever it is. And so I would say there's what have you got to lose by trying to turn that into a positive, or at least into something more neutral, just trying to understand more about it and to find out why it is that such and such a thing is regarded as being negative. And just to get to the bottom of these sorts of things, because I mean, one gets presented with these sorts of things all the time, or indeed just just very sort of bizarre things. I mean, I was at an event a couple of months ago where I have to say I was totally bamboozled. A lady came up to me and said she had driven to the event on a road that I was familiar with, and said, now, what do you think these things are on the side of the road? They're sort of they're like dark rectangular things with other stuff attached to them. So I said, do you mean the solar panels, which are attached to like roadworks lights and those sorts of things? And it turned out she did mean that, and she did know that they were solar panels, but her suggestion or question was, do you think they are something else as well? And I had never considered such a thing, but it was clear that the reason for her question was because she was quite determined to be fearful of these things, which, by the way, were absolutely, definitely solar panels and just solar panels. But so, of course, I could have perpetuated the fear that I was detecting or not, and I chose not. So we just had a matter of fact conversation in which I wasn't dismissive, but I felt that I would talk about it on a slightly different level, and hopefully the conclusion of the conversation was that her point of view about that was slightly better or less negative, less fearful than it had been at the start. So I think one always has the choice of whether to feed and fuel that negativity that's presented to you, or to try to turn it or better understand it. And I think once you do better understand it, whatever it is, that then you're in a much more commanding position to be able to influence that conversation, and hopefully that person, if they're struggling. Because I think that's the other thing. I think compassion. Yeah, a bit. Anyway, sorry.
No, Charles. I think you're actually hitting the nail on the head there, in a sense, because there is no question that a lot of people in the world, particularly since 2020, have been damaged by what is going on around them. One of the most flattering things that was said about the column over those COVID years was, "You kept us sane." Well, that was a nice side effect of what we were doing. It wasn't something that we actually considered at the time. That was just an effect of the way that we were presenting the information, perhaps. But I think it's something that is a really positive thing that we can all do. Is that when we see somebody fearful about current events, that we just take the time to help them through that, and help them recognize that first of all, nothing is achieved by living in a state of fear other than our own self-destruction, but just to try to put things in a bit of context that helps them deal with life and with the situation. So many people I hear now saying, I have just switched everything off. I've switched the news off. I've switched all social media off. I'm not interested in what's going on in the world. Well, that's fine. If that's what's needed at that moment, then do that. But of course, that isn't going to stop the events that are going on around us, and it isn't going to, at the end of the day, at least I feel that I have a moral obligation to do what I can, whatever little I can, to help change the direction of future events, and help is the key word, because none of us as individuals can do everything or even anything massively significant. It has to be a team effort, and so but it's we've made this point over and over again during this conversation. It starts with us as individuals, but it is without question also about whether it's all about us as individuals or whether we're prepared to help. And helping isn't necessarily just bludgeoning people over the head with facts and saying that they're wrong all the time. Help might be actually helping people through their own thought processes. And actually, I believe that there are many, many more people that are reconsidering their view of the world at the moment than we know about. And if we go in with a sledgehammer, we actually push them back into the old mindset, and we've got to be gentle with people, and this is something that we've been trying to encourage for many years. But so think about it in those terms, I think would be what I would encourage.
No, it's a very, very important point. Whether it's beliefs or actions, but they have to be owned by the individual on the subject of ownership. Because if that is not the case, then that spells disaster when anything goes wrong. Because if you let's say you convince somebody of such and such a thing to be the case, and they're actually not necessarily ready to receive that or ready to take it on board. It's not so much their decision to have done that, or worse still, if it's something that pertains to an action or decision in their life, and then it goes wrong. Of course, not their fault; it's your fault, because you introduced the idea or you introduced the advice that led them to take a particular action, and you're absolutely right. People have to be ready to receive in whatever situation. I mean, I say people, like I'm different. No, I'm exactly the same. We're all the same. It just doesn't work the other way around, and we need to spend more time stopping and thinking about that and putting the boot on the other foot. Just to go back one anecdotally, yes, the sanity thing is absolutely critical. And I do remember, I mean, I hope this is of interest, but I was, believe it or not, prior to working for UK Column, I was in the police. I was a detective, and I can remember at the height of the sort of, you must be mad if you're not having 25 vaccines a minute kind of period, and thought, I just looking around at what did seem to be an absolutely crazy society where this seemed to be the view across the board. And I sat and said, and this was having had no prior contact with UK Column at all, and I sat in, it was sort of late December 2021, it must have been. I think I am temperamentally unsuited to work for any other organization. I mean, any organization in the world. I just cannot see a single outfit that I would sort of belong in, except for UK Column. And that's what I said. And talking about this idea that you have to believe something first before you can make it happen. I mean, okay, I don't mean that. It's a bit of a shoehorning exercise to explain that that's why I'm here now. But the the point of it was that absolutely the sanity side of it was very, very critical, and that was, when I think back to my perspective then, to consider that UK Column was offering that calm and rational examination of what was going on, and I hope today still what is going on, rather than the explosive sort of sensationalist approach to treatment of the same subjects, which I don't think really does anybody any favours, certainly not in the long term. And then just another anecdote in terms of how much one must persist. Jerm, you will also be familiar with this, but because obviously we've had conversations about it. I've explored to a certain extent the way in which the Church of England manages the enormous amounts of money that it sits on, and by coincidence, this year, back in February, the General Synod, the Bishop of Bath and Wells spoke out about one of the things I've touched on, which is how little money is dispersed by the church commissioners to the churches for their upkeep. And as somebody who's involved with the church locally, I can tell you that every single church in the country pretty much has some sort of buildings related issue which is going to cost a fortune, and everybody else is, the congregation by and large is asked to pay for it. Anyway, long and boring story, but I'd written a couple of articles for the column, and having seen that that Bath and Wells had written about this and spoken about it, I got in touch with him and said, right, matey, as well as what you're pointing out, are you aware that this is how the Church Commission runs the funds in the first place? That they are able to invest in pornography, weapons, and genomics and that kind of thing. And remarkably, he replied, but he just said, oh, well, that might be something you want to take up with the Church Commissioners. That you might want to take up with the Church Commissioners. The fact that he is a sitting bishop in the Church of England, and yet he didn't want to have anything to do with it, was extraordinary. Anyway, I will obviously continue, but so yes, we have to take these steps, but you do also have to be prepared to be beaten back at every level, but you keep going.
What's the moral of the story?
What, that particular story, or the general moral of the story? I suppose
yes.
they're probably one and the same. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of something that's not going to sound too trite, because remaining positive would be such a sort of, such an easy thing to say. But crikey, never ever give up with anything. And I think I say that as somebody who's had a majority of a lifetime of sort of, being in a lot of situations where, practically speaking, the outlook is a bit bleak. The sort of stuck in the middle of nowhere with armed with only a paperclip, or I'm being a bit facetious, but the point is, being in situations where it appears that all is lost, and rather than thinking all is lost, you think, right, okay, well, I've got this and I've got that, which means that I can make such and such a thing, and you basically look at every single situation in terms of how are you going to get out of it? How are you going to make the best of it? Rather than sitting back and thinking, right, well, that's me done for. I could, that was beyond my control. I couldn't help that, so therefore I am helpless. That is absolutely never ever the case. And I'm talking, it's slightly figurative, but I don't mean it figuratively. I do mean it literally, and I really do mean it mentally. And it all starts in the mind. And if you don't have that in your mind, then you cannot translate any of this into an effect. So hold it in your mind always, and even if it means having to have a brief period of stepping back and just evaluating in order that you don't concede defeat, then do that. Just retain a sense of perspective, but never ever lose that sense of being able to overcome whatever is put in your path.
I would say that one of the things that we've got to do is to be is to take that step back and actually be a little bit objective about the events that are going on around us. We are looking at a world which seems on the surface to be completely off its head, completely insane, and completely out of control. And recognize that actually the reason for that is because the people that are running this planet are out of control. They're out of control because they're not winning. They're out of control because they're not achieving the goals that they've set for themselves. They're out of control because they're increasingly desperate. And, over the last 20 or 30 years, you just sit and watch people becoming prime minister or taking on some kind of role of so-called authority. And they look one way when they enter that job. And when they leave the job, they look almost broken. They're grey-haired, or their hair's fallen out. They're certainly looking significantly older. They're looking like they didn't have that they've got no energy left. We got to look at that objectively and recognize that these people are not enjoying themselves. And I don't want to take pleasure from that necessarily, but just to recognize that this is the events are as they are because things are not going well for the goals and the objectives of some of these people and these organizations. And so even at the darkest moments, there's a lot of, if we can see the positivity that's in it, there's a lot to be positive about, and to recognize that actually part of the reason that they are feeling this way and that they are behaving this way is because the COVID operation didn't work, and there was enough opposition and enough resistance to it, and enough people just standing up saying, oh, rubbish, we can see what you're doing, that they weren't able to achieve all their goals. We just got to keep doing that. And as Charles says, never give up, because nothing is ever lost until we're dead. So that would be my thoughts on that.
I think another way of packaging the idea of positivity, which has obviously been the undercurrent of this conversation, is the metaphor of the white pearl, or just simply being solutions orientated. It's really that simple. I mean, if you aren't trying to solve the problems in your personal life first, then you're not being positive. You're being somewhat destructive.
Yeah, but Jerm, let's let me interject there for 1 second, because I think what's really important is because what you're saying is absolutely right. But what we've all got to make sure that we're doing is not waiting for somebody else to do that for us.
100%. Yes, 100%. But that's exactly where I was going with that. You got to start, as we keep saying, start with you and then go outwards from there. You cannot fix the Ukraine or Gaza situation. You cannot. There's nothing you can do. You cannot stop the BIS. You cannot stop the UN. But what you can do is stop the nonsense that's coming directly into your personal life and into your family. And then from there, you can affect change within your community, and then it kind of goes out from there.
Yeah, and sometimes we get glimpses into how effective any of this is being. Specifically, just referred to the COVID sort of overreach and cock up in terms of rolling out a plan. Okay, obviously it's vulnerable to all sorts of inaccuracies, one would guess. But there's a report just published in the Lancet saying that vaccination rates worldwide have declined very substantially since 2020, and and I don't say that thinking, that's just great. People are not taking pharmaceutical products that might help them. I'm saying that that's because people have actually stopped and thought about it and considered that those products are not going to help them. So it's to be really specific about it. It is a question of people actually being aware of a particular plot, as it were, and reacting against it, and that is now demonstrated by these statistics. As I say, yes, okay, with all statistics, one has to be very, very careful about how you interpret them or whether you even give them any credence in the first place. But nonetheless, that is out there. That is a pretty substantial demonstration of exactly what you two have just been talking about.
Well, let's come in for the landing. Looking at the time. Final thoughts, Mike?
Good one.
This is good. Excellent final thought there. What can I say?
Mike's final thought.
Well, I mean, it has a sort of positive note to it. I think actually, what will be nice is this time next week we'll be able to talk about meeting people in person, because we're about to trundle off to an event in the South England countryside in Dorset, an event called Sounds Beautiful, which we did go to last year. It was really good fun. And this is where we get to sort of test out this sort of stuff that we talk about, because we will be rubbing shoulders with all sorts of people. And actually, that really is the case, because I remember last year, and this is not too surprising, but in addition to people who had heard of Sounds Beautiful from the likes of UK Column or sort of all the channels that they were tuned into, there were also people just who were folk local to the event in Dorset, and therefore had just gone along because it was an event and it had interesting stands and music and talk and stuff. So there will be a really good cross section of people there, and it is up to us to make sure that the interactions that we have and the experiences that people have at that festival are overwhelmingly positive, and that people do go away feeling lifted and feeling that they can make those changes to their lives and to engender the support of a community and to push on. And this is in itself an act of defiance, resistance, call it what you like, because don't forget, these are precisely the things that the ill doers want to shut down. They want to prevent these sorts of things from happening. They want to prevent positive association. So yeah, that's for us, that's our sort of look forward to is a weekend of seeing, just getting out there and seeing people and being, actually in a really beautiful part of the world. And making the most of it,
and hopefully the weather will be good. But just as a general point, anytime people get together, doesn't matter whether it's a UK Column event or Sounds Beautiful or the Stand in the Light or the Lights Festival. Once people are together and feeling with others, it's always a massively positive event. It's brilliant, and so the theme of this discussion has been, it starts with ourselves. It starts with ourselves, and it starts with us getting out and off the sofa or off the office chair or whatever it is that we sit and watch the blooming computer screen, switch the computer off, and get out and actually have some real human interaction.
And it ends with the glorious sounds of chickens in the background.
Well, I would hope so. Yeah, absolutely. For always. I mean, yeah, this is a lovely thing to be surrounded by, and I don't mean this as a sort of throwaway thing, but watching groups of animals of all different species just crack on and do their thing is so inspiring, always.
Yes.
Inspiring and amusing. We frequently end up with chickens in the house. I have plenty coming in here in the office with the door open. Luckily, none has destroyed any equipment yet, but it's only a matter of time, presumably. So yeah, why not? And yet we live in these bizarre sort of rigid groupings or whatever, and to a large extent we've forgotten about our natural instincts towards, I would say, positivity and cooperation. So let's just get back to that.